to recognize the best dressed, best looking senator in the room right now.
Mr. President, what an honor. Thank you so much for commending me with such a large crowd. Mr. President, this is a beautiful day, and we're all glad to be here to work for the people of our district, people of Georgia. Don't have much to say about...
Answer to prayer.
But today is National Banana Bread Day, if anybody cares. And Tootsie Roll was invented in 1896. And Mr. President, the journal's been read and found to be correct.
Thank you for your efforts overnight. Is there objection to dispensing with the reading of the journal? Chair hears none, and the reading of the journal is dispensed with. Is there objection to the confirmation of the journal? The chair hears none, and the journal is confirmed. All senators who have bills or resolutions, please bring them to the secretary's desk at this time. Mr. Secretary, first reading of Senate bills and resolutions, please.
Senate Bill 220 by Senator Payne of the 54th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 2 of Chapter 14 of Title 20 of the OCGA relating to Education Accountability Assessment Program so as to create the Georgia Commission on... Senate Bill 221...
Education and Youth.
Senate Bill 221 by Senators Mullis of the 53rd and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 5 of Title 21 of the OCGA relating to ethics in government so as to provide for a definition, to provide for leadership committees. Senate Bill 222 by Senator Summers of the 13th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 3 of Chapter 3 of Title 50 of the OCGA relating to state symbols so as to designate the pecan as the official state nut.
Ag and Consumer Affairs.
Senate Bill 223 by Senators Robertson of the 29th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 8 of Title 42 of the OCGA relating to probation management so as to
Public
enact...
Safety.
Senate Bill 224 by Senators Harrell of the 40th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 1 of Chapter 16 of Title 50 of the OCGA relating to general provisions for public property so as to
Natural
require...
Resources.
Senate Bill 225 by Senator Harbison of the 15th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 3 of Chapter 2 of Title 40 of the OCGA relating to prestige license plates and special plates for certain
Veterans,
persons.
Military, Homeland Security.
Senate Bill 226 by Senators Anna Vitarte of the 31st and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Part 3 of Article 3 of Chapter 12 of Title 16 of the OCGA relating to sale or distribution of harmful materials to minors so as to provide that the provision...
Judiciary.
Senate Bill 227 by Senators Jones II of the 22nd and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 1 of Title 22 of the OCGA relating to general provisions regarding eminent domain so as to provide for an alternative process for accounting...
Judiciary.
Senate Bill 228 by Senators Albers of the 56th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Part 2 of Article 15 of Chapter 1 of Title 10 of the OCGA relating to the fair business
Science and Technology.
Senate Bill 229 by Senators Harrell of the 40th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Code Section 16-11-127.1 of the OCGA relating to carrying weapons within school safety zones at school functions.
Public Safety.
Senate Bill 230 by Senators Jordan of the 6th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Part 1 of Article 2 of Chapter 8 of Title 12 of the OCGA relating to general provisions relative to solid waste management so as to provide for the commission.
Natural Resources.
Senate Bill 231 by Senators Anna Vitarte of the 31st and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 2 of Title 20 of the OCGA relating to elementary and secondary education so as to provide for a pilot program
Education and Youth.
Senate Bill 232 by Senators Harbin of the 16th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 2 of Title 21 of the OCGA relating to primaries and elections generally so as to require unique barcodes on individual absentee ballots to revise provisions
Ethics.
regarding... Senate Bill 233 by Senators Jones of the 25th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 2 of Title 21 of the OCGA relating to primaries and elections generally so as to provide for new voting systems for use in elections in this state, to provide
Ethics.
for... Senate Bill 234 by Senators Kennedy of the 18th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Title 9 of the OCGA relating to civil practice so as to provide for uniform law governing mediation and participants in mediation, to provide for definitions, to provide
Judiciary.
for... Senate Bill 235 by Senators Watson of the 1st and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 2 of Chapter 11 of Title 16 of the OCGA relating to offenses against public order so as to revise the offense of wearing a mask, hood.
Health and Human Services.
Senate Resolution 136 by Senators Anna Vitarte of the 31st and others, a resolution encouraging the Technical College System of Georgia, the Department of Education, the Department of Corrections, and the Department of Juvenile Justice to collaborate and develop programs.
Education and Youth.
Senate Resolution 138 by Senators James of the 35th and others, a resolution honoring Mr. Henry Hank Lewis Aaron and dedicating a road in his memory. And
Transportation.
this completes the order, Mr. President.
first reading of House bills and resolutions, please.
House Bill 98 by Representative Lumsden of the 12th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Title 50 of the OCGA relating to state government so as to provide conditions for meeting and public hearings to be held by teleconference.
Science and technology.
House Bill 150 by Representatives Williamson of the 115th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Title 46 of the OCGA relating to public utilities and public transportation so as to prohibit governmental entities from adopting
Regulated industries.
House Bill 156 by Representatives Parsons of the 44th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Title 38 and 50 of the OCGA relating to military, emergency management, and veterans affairs.
Veterans, military, and homeland security.
House Bill 234 by Representatives Hawkins of the 27th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Title 33 of the OCGA relating to insurance so as to provide an option for self-funded health care
Health and
plans.
Human Services.
House Bill 268 by Representatives Werkheiser of the 157th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 28 of Title 43 of the OCGA relating to occupational therapists so as
Health
to
and Human
revise.
Services.
House Bill 237 by Representatives Ballinger of the 23rd and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 3 of Chapter 4 of Title 3 of the OCGA relating to local authorization and regulations for manufacturing.
Regulated industries. Just as a clarification, that was House Bill 273.
Oh, my apologies. House Bill 307 by Representatives Cooper of the 43rd and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 1 of Chapter 24 of Title 33 of the OCGA relating to insurance generally so as to revise the Georgia Telehealth Act, to revise definitions to
Health and
authorize.
Human Services.
House Bill 362 by Representatives Rhodes of the 120th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Code Section 12-2-2 of the OCGA relating to
Natural
environmental.
resources.
This completes the order, Mr. President.
Mr. Secretary, first, will you please read reports of standing committees?
Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Education and Youth has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Bill 47, due pass by substitute. Senate Bill 66, due pass by substitute. Senate Bill 159, due pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Payne of the 54th. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Ethics has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Bill 93, due pass. Senate Bill 141, due pass by substitute. Senate Resolution 100, due pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Burns of the 23rd. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Finance has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Bill 193, due pass. Senate Bill 201, due pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Hofstetler of the 52nd. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Government Oversight has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Resolution 37, due pass. Senate Bill 120, due pass. Senate Bill 144, due pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Harbin of the 16th. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Judiciary has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Bill 85, due pass by substitute. Senate Bill 78, due pass by substitute. Senate Bill 143, due pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Strickland of the 17th. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on State and Local Governmental Operations has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Bill 182, due pass. House Bill 129, due pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Anderson of the 24th. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Veterans, Military, and Homeland Security has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Bill 96, due pass. House Bill 105, due pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Kirkpatrick of the 32nd. This completes the order, Mr. President.
Mr. Secretary, will you please read bills and resolutions for the second time?
Senate Bill 157 by Senator Cowsert of the 46th and others, Fair Business Practice Acts of 1975, Deceptive Practice of Musical Performance Group Advertising Prohibit. This completes the order, Mr. President.
All right, it's now time for morning roll call. Are there any motions to excuse? The chair recognizes the senator from the 33rd.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, y'all. I ask for unanimous consent to excuse the following senators from the 12th, the 32nd, the 35th, the 38th. That's it, sir. Thank you. For business inside the Capitol.
Without objection, the senators from the 12th, 32nd, 35th, and 38th are excused. Is any additional motions to excuse? All right. Secretary will call the roll of senators. Chair recognizes the Dean of the Senate.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the second.
Without objection, the senator from the second is excused. Any additional? Chair sees none. The Secretary will call the roll of the senators. Signify your presence by voting the yea switch. Mr. Secretary, please unlock the machine. Have all senators voted your presence? Now they have. Mr. Secretary, please close the machine. It's now time for a morning devotional, and I'd ask that all senators please take your seats and cease all audible conversations. Doorkeepers, please secure the chamber at this time. I'd like to recognize our good friend, the senator from the 37th, to lead us in our pledge and introduce to us our chaplain of the day.
Join me, if you will, in honoring the flag of our nation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now the Georgia flag. I pledge allegiance to the Georgia flag, the principles for which it stands, wisdom, justice, and moderation. It's my pleasure to introduce to you this morning a man that's made a great impact in West Cobb County. He's built on a firm foundation that one of our dear friends who was just recently called home, Reverend Mike Stevens, who was a founding pastor of Burnt Hickory Baptist Church, was there since the inception. Mike was very instrumental in the county, and his ministry went far beyond the county. Mike was involved in international ministries. But Matt has been on staff since 2001. He graduated from West Georgia. He graduated from Liberty University. I could tell you all the things he's done, but I can tell you most importantly, his heart is dedicated solely to the proclamation of the gospel. Matt has a long history of serving other people, but through the ministry of Jesus Christ, he has brought light in the midst of darkness. He's brought hope in the midst of despair. He's brought direction on the path of uncertainty, and he's brought comfort in the time of sorrow. He's been a great pastor, a great friend, and a great minister. Please make Matt welcome. Matt Petty.
Well, good morning. Thank you so much today for having me. And I just want you to know this morning, on behalf of Burnt Hickory Church in West Cobb, I bring greetings. And then I also bring greetings from the Petty family. At minimum, as far as I can go back, at least 8 generations of Pettys have been in Georgia. Before that, we were too poor to be counted, so we're really not sure past that point. But thank you, Senator Tippins. I express my appreciation to you for having me, this body, for having me this morning, and also for all of you guys. I just wanted to say before I read a passage this morning that I know it seems like sometimes in the public service that what we get to do does not go noticed, but I guarantee you from people like me that we appreciate how you fight for our people, how you fight for our state, and how you lead with integrity. And may God bless your decisions for His glory and for the betterment of Georgia. as what you will be deciding today. I want to just give you a brief word of encouragement today. I want to just bring up a conversation from two different people in Scripture that I believe that, especially in the moments that we're in, leading in unprecedented times and in question times, that I think you'll find incredibly, incredibly relevant. One of them is from the Old Testament. One of them is from the New Testament. The Old Testament would be a message from a man named King Solomon. King Solomon was a public servant. He was a king. He was a ruler. And as soon as he took charge, stepping into his father's footsteps, King David, I want to read a word and a prayer that he had, that he was praying that he would be a ruler of integrity. Listen to what he said in 1 Kings, verse 3. It says, "Now, Lord my God, may you have made your servant king in place of my father David, but I am only a little child." He wasn't a little child, but he was in his leading. And he said, "And sometimes I do not know how to carry out my duties." Now, I don't bring a charge that you don't know how to carry out your duties, but I would say in the last year, there's been lots of decisions that have never been made before by all of us. And listen to what he says. "So, Lord, here's my prayer. Give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong. For who is able to govern this great people of yours?" Now watch the result of this prayer that he prayed. The Lord was pleased that Solomon asked this. So God said to him, "Since you have asked for this, and not for a long life or for wealth for yourself, or for death of your enemies," now there's a leader, "but you have asked for discernment and administering justice, I will do what you have asked, and I will give you a wise and discerning heart." That's an incredible prayer for a servant leader in a room just like this, to pray for a discerning heart, to pray for a leading heart, to pray for a heart that connects justice with peace, with love, and with leadership, from the wisest man that walked in the Old Testament. But about 1,000 years later, another wise man walked, and he told us how we can carry this out. He told us how we can live out this prayer of discernment and this prayer of wisdom, this prayer of justice. And it was a guy named Jesus. Jesus said it like this. Here's how we can live out this prayer and live out this prayer of discernment. He said we live out the great commandment, which is simply this. Matthew 22, verse 37. Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. For this is the greatest commandment, and the second is like it, and that is to love your neighbor as yourself. And all the law of the prophets hang on these two commands." What did he say there? He said you can boil everything that we do in this life down to two things: loving the Lord, the maker of the universe, the creator God, the sustainer, the Savior, with everything we have, and loving others as ourselves. And I think if we can take these words from King Solomon and praying for discernment, and take the words from King Jesus and ask the Lord to help us love Him and love others, then we will faithfully govern. We'll faithfully love, we'll faithfully rule. And here's my prayer, and Solomon's prayer, and Jesus' prayer for all of us, is that God would give us discerning hearts. He would give us loving hearts. He would give us serving hearts. And that we would love others selflessly. And listen, when that takes place, to God be the glory. And the people that we represent, which just like Solomon said, are so numerous, will also fall into the category of being loved. Know this, Senate, you're being prayed for. You're being prayed for by a lot of people in a lot of places. You may not get the messages, you may not get the conversations sent back to you as often as you would like it. But know we're praying for discernment for you. We're praying for your leadership. We're praying for your hearts. And we're so thankful that you represent us well. So from a boy from West Cobb County, from 8 generations of Georgians, I'm proud to stand here and just say thank you this morning. Follow the discernment of the Lord for His glory and the great things that He has done. Let me pray for us this morning. Lord Jesus, today, as we stand in this place of leadership, as we're following on the footsteps of so many for so many years, Lord, let our prayer be the prayer of King Solomon, God. God, give us wisdom today. Give us discernment today. Give us love for you today. And give us love for others and how we rule. Lord Jesus, I pray that the message of our heart would be a message that you would have us to have today, Lord Jesus. And it's in your holy name. Amen and amen. Thank you for having me.
Senate will come back to order. Are there any unanimous consents? The chair sees none. As a quick reminder to the chamber, per the rules, on day 21, points of personal privilege go from 5 minutes to 3 minutes. So today will be the first day of 3 minutes, and that will go all the way through day 40. So just as a reminder, and obviously we've got the light system up here to help remind you. The chair recognizes the majority leader for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be much briefer than my 3 minutes. I rise today to pay recognition and honor one of my staff members. Elizabeth Fetzer, everybody in here knows her as Lizzie, has been a great asset to our office, and she came as an intern a couple of years ago. We're recognizing her today because this is the one time in her life she will be the same age as her birthday. So she turned 23 today on the 23rd. Lizzie's in here, and I just want to say how much we appreciate you and happy birthday.
Chair recognizes the Dean of the Senate for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today to commemorate a person for Black History Month. Major Capers was born August 25th, 1937, a South Carolina native, sharecropper, Jim Crow era. He later moved to Baltimore, Maryland, where he would meet the love of his life, wife Dottie, and decided to enlist in the Marines. This would be the start of a legendary career that overcame obstacles and broke barriers on and off the battlefield as one of the greatest Marines ever lived. While serving, he would be selected to join the elite Force Recon Marine Unit, where he excelled, breaking training records, participating in 64 long-range reconnaissance patrols, and 5 major campaigns in Vietnam. He was a natural leader and father figure to Team Broad-Minded, a specialized group of Force Recon Marines. Capers and Team Broad-Minded were routinely selected to go on the most dangerous and clandestine missions in the era of Vietnam. Missions included a POW rescue ordered by President Johnson, amphibious assault in the DMZ, recovery of a B-57 rumored to have a nuclear bomb on board, and search and destroy patrols in Phu Loc in Vietnam. A soft-spoken man, his commendations offer an inspiring view of his heroism and self-sacrifice. Nominated for the Medal of Honor, he has been awarded the Silver Star, 2 Bronze Stars, and Combat V, 3 Purple Hearts, Battle Stars, Navy Commendation Medal, and etc. As an African American, his achievements included being the first African American to command a Marine Recon company and the first enlisted African American Marine officer to receive a battlefield commission. In the fall of 1967, while recovering from combat injuries, Major James Capers was selected to represent the U.S. Marines in a national recruiting campaign. He was the first African American to be so honored. Following Vietnam, Capers participated in many Cold War covert operations as field agent in Eastern Europe and Africa. Details of these operations remain classified even to today. In 2010, Major Capers Jr. was one of 14 members inducted into the inaugural class of the U.S. Special Operations Command Hall of Honor, headquartered at MacDill Air Force Base. Capers currently resides in North Carolina and continues to be part of the Special Operations community. United American Patriots are pushing everybody to nominate him and support his petition to be honored with the Medal of Honor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 53rd District. Somebody's playing a game on him. His button's pushed. Chair recognizes the senator from the 56th District for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to recognize an extraordinary woman, who happens to be my soulmate, my best friend, and my wife, Carrie. Today is our 28th wedding anniversary. We have spent the past many years celebrating our anniversary when we're in legislative session, and I know that she is always doing great stuff at our home, raising our two boys, a wonderful mother, wonderful friend, and I'm just so thankful for my wife, Carrie, and happy anniversary, sweetie. Thank you, I read.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 32nd for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't know if anybody noticed my really colorful mask today. And the reason that I'm wearing that is because I'm congratulating the Booth Western Art Museum, and the senator from the 14th has this wonderful museum in his district. Saturday night, they had their virtual gala to raise funds for the museum. And as you know, all of our museums are struggling right now because of the pandemic. So this was very important. The Booth Western Art Museum is a jewel of our state. It's right up I-75 in Cartersville, and if you haven't seen it, you should go. This museum was just named the best art museum in the United States by USA Today's Reader's Choice Awards, and that is just an unbelievable honor. They have a presidential gallery that will just floor you with just beautiful display of every president of our country, and also the best collection of Western art east of the Mississippi River. We definitely, my husband and I collect Western art, and I think you'd really enjoy it. So I just wanted to congratulate the Booth on just a really fabulous accomplishment. Their director, Seth Hopkins, and his wife, Joyce, they do a great job, and please go visit the Booth. And if you need to know how to get there, come see me. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the will.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 14th for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate the senator talking about our museums up in Bartow County. There's several of them to come up and see, but I rise today in a time right now where we're talking about defunding police and we're talking about the challenges we have with first responders. I rise to recognize the first responders and law enforcement we have in our state. As I come down 75 each morning, just yesterday and the day before, I noticed 4 different accidents between our home and 285. A car ablaze, 1 car sideways, a semi sideways, all within those realms. There wasn't people like myself stopping. It was first responders and law enforcement putting their lives on the line so that traffic can continue to move, putting their lives on the line to be able to pull people out of burning cars to try and save their lives. So I'd like to raise today to let first responders and our law enforcement in our state know how much I appreciate what they do each and every day, and we stand behind them.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 6th for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today is my daughter's birthday, and my beautiful baby girl is 12, and I am so thankful that she is healthy. You know, nothing really prepares you for motherhood. It's been said it's like having your heart walking around outside of your body forever. And as your child grows, you're not able to protect them because the world can be really unkind. But for black and brown men, the world can be deadly. Which brings me to why I stand today. 1 year ago, on February 23rd, Ahmaud Arbery was hunted in broad daylight and murdered while jogging in the middle of the day on a Monday afternoon. I will never forget watching the video of his murder. It literally took my breath away. And all I could think is that poor young man, he must have been terrified He was someone's son. He was a beloved young man. And no one can look at that video and justify the actions of those three men. But someone with power did just that. And the system that is supposed to guard against this type of prosecutorial misconduct, guard against the culture of corruption, failed this young man's family. And to be clear, if that video had not been made public, there would not be a bipartisan effort to repeal the citizens' arrest law, a law rooted in violence and slavery. If that video had not been made public, we wouldn't have passed the hate crimes bill last year. And while these are meaningful and necessary reforms, there has not been a reckoning as to what happened after Ahmaud was murdered on February 23rd, a year ago today. Why was George Barnhart appointed by the AG to take over the case after the local DA recused? Why did he ignore video evidence and try to prevent its disclosure to the public? Why did it take the release of a video to get him off the case? And then we had to have the GBI come in, per the governor, just to get these men arrested. At the time, there were calls for investigations into these failures, bipartisan calls. But a year has passed, and there are still no answers. The system failed this young man's family. There would have been no justice. But we cannot. It has to be our obligation, our duty to shine the light on each of the failures, to hold people to account, because if we don't identify and rectify what went wrong, the situation will repeat and justice will be denied again and again. We cannot, we must not let that happen. I yield the well.
Chair recognizes the minority leader for a point of personal privilege. For the purpose of the doctor of the day. That reserves you the right to have another point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I am here to introduce you to the doctor of the day. Dr. Latifah Watford serves as Chief of Behavioral Health for the Southeast Permanente Medical Group, the medical group that provides care for Kaiser Permanente of Georgia members. As a general child, adolescent, and forensic psychiatrist, she works diligently to ensure her patients receive the care they need in a respectful, caring, and clinical competent manner. A passionate advocate for access to mental health care and reducing the stigma around mental health. She works closely with her colleagues to educate patients and provide them the tools to heal and move forward in their lives in a healthy manner, while also encouraging them to take an active role in developing and implementing appropriate coping skills. She believes in the importance of treating the entire body, the entire person, mind, and spirit, and encourages all her patients to be active in their self-care, take time to appreciate and celebrate the small things, and laugh. She received her medical degree from the Morehouse School of Medicine and completed residency training in pediatrics and general psychiatry, as well as a fellowship in child adolescent at Indiana University. She also completed a forensic psychiatry fellowship at Emory University. She joined Kaiser Permanente in 2012 and primarily sees patients at the Gwinnett KP Medical Office. An avid reader and traveler when not working, Dr. Watford enjoys taking trips with her family and learning about different cultures and different locations. So if you need medical services, please visit Dr. Watford at the nurses station on the second floor. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield well.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes the senator from the 40th for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. Gentlemen and ladies of the Senate, we are all here to do one thing for our constituents, to solve problems. They elect us to fix all kinds of real-world issues that affect their everyday lives. This session, one issue seems to be dominating our attention. That issue is voting. We do have some issues with our voting system. It's not perfect, but the solutions we're seeing proposed by the majority party aren't addressing the real problems. They're addressing a perception of a problem about voter fraud that our Secretary of State, our Lieutenant Governor, our Governor, and multiple courts have all told us do not exist. Real problems do require legislation. Perception problems require leadership. They require leaders to tell the truth that there was no widespread voter fraud. If we were solving real voting problems, we might think about voters like Susan, who is 59 and disabled and never received her absentee ballot, so she was unable to vote last election. Or Kristen, a Georgia resident who is in Arkansas for pharmacy school. She had the same problem when she found out she would not receive her absentee ballot in time. So you know what she did? She booked a last-minute flight back home to Georgia so she could vote in person. Susan and Kristen are not alone. This was an issue for literally thousands of people this past election. Or we might listen to our poll workers and poll watchers. I have friends who have been both, and they tell me that their number one issue that they saw on election day was people showing up to the wrong precinct. They're confused about the difference between early voting locations and their assigned precinct. These are real problems that can be fixed by legislation. Let's fix these problems. And if we're not going to solve the real voting problem, let's not create new ones. Voter identification is important, but when we leave out 200,000 Georgians that don't have photo IDs, we're creating problems instead of solving them. Let's not overburden our already cash-strapped local elections offices by requiring them to count ballots without breaks because we just want our results sooner. Besides voting, we have so many other real problems to solve, like people waiting months for unemployment checks, or people having trouble booking vaccine appointments, or businesses that are having trouble accessing the Paycheck Protection Program. We have so many important problems to solve. We simply don't have time to fix those that don't exist. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 31st for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today is Dyslexia Day in Georgia, and 1 in 5 individuals have dyslexia. Dyslexia is the most common learning disability. 80% of individuals with a learning disability have dyslexia. Individuals with dyslexia may have a weakness in decoding, reading fluency, but are often surrounded by a sea of strengths in reasoning, problem solving, concept formation, critical thinking, and vocabulary. It is abundantly fitting and proper to draw attention to the profound educational impact of dyslexia on education and the lives of countless children, adults, and students in the state of Georgia. We cannot stop at awareness about dyslexia, but must focus on intervention, real intervention. Based on current models of how school systems support students with dyslexia, success is determined by if parents have the capacity to provide out-of-school tutoring. So many students in our schools with dyslexia, success should not be based solely on parent tutoring support. This is ultimately a civil rights issue for those that have the knowledge and the capacity to get this outside support. I believe with 28 senators signing Senate Resolution 95 that brings Dyslexia Day to us today, that we can finally get something done in this state. Mr. President, I yield the well.
All right, we're going to move on. You have a consent calendar of privileged resolutions before you. Does any senator wish to remove a resolution from the consent calendar? The chair sees none. Is there objection to the adoption of the resolutions on the consent calendar? The chair hears none, and the resolutions on the consent calendar are adopted. Are there any motions to withdraw and commit? The chair sees none. Chair recognizes the Majority Leader for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent that the following bills be engrossed: Senate Bill 40, Senate Bill 67, Senate Bill 184, and Senate Bill 188.
The Majority Leader has moved to engross Senate Bills 40, 67, 184, and 188. Is there objection? There's objection. Would the Majority Leader like to speak to his motion?
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the body. I feel like I do this fairly often. Ethics bills and finance bills are traditionally engrossed and when they come to the floor. So this is not a new precedent. So I got asked the question earlier, where is that in our rules? It is not in our rules. It's our precedent. What is in our rules is that any member of the body can move for engrossment on any bill. I'm moving for engrossment because it's the long-standing policy of this body that finance bills and ethics bills be engrossed. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 42nd to speak to the objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. There are a couple things that arose in speaking to my elections director, for example, and that I think might need some tweaking in a couple of these bills where I think the intent is really good, and with a little improvement, I'd be able to support them. Unfortunately, now they're coming the way they are, and we can't have that discussion and try to improve them and get it across in a better form to the House. So that's why engrossment is not always a good idea when legitimate things have been raised that the body might say, oh yeah, actually that is a really good point and we could just go ahead and fix it now. Now we're stripped of that ability. And so that's why I'm going to vote against engrossment and ask you to join me. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the motion to engross? Chair sees none. The questions on the motion from the Majority Leader to engross Senate Bills 40, 67, 184, and 188. All those in favor of the motion to engross will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The Secretary will unlock the machine. Have all senators voted? Have all senators voted? We got is that a one or a thumbs up? Thumbs up. I'm getting old. All right, Mr. Secretary, please close the machine. On the motion, the ayes are 32, the nays are 18, and Senate Bills 40, 67, 184, and 188 are engrossed. All right, we're now moving on to the rules calendar. Mr. Secretary, can you please read the caption of Senate Bill 67?
Senate Bill 67 by Senator Walker of the 20th, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 2 of Title 21 of the OCGA relating to elections and primaries generally so as to provide for the submission of identification in connection with absentee ballot applications, to provide for the submission of photocopies of voter identification documents for absentee ballot applications, to provide for requesting of absentee ballot applications through a web portal. The Senate Committee on Ethics recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Burns of the 23rd. Senate Committee on Ethics offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 67, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 2 of Title 21 of the OCGA relating to elections and primaries generally so as to provide for the submission of identification in connection with absentee ballot applications, to provide for the submission of photocopies of voter identification documents for absentee ballot applications, to remove signature comparisons, to provide for requesting of absentee ballot applications through a web portal. This completes the order, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 20th to speak to Senate Bill 67.
Good morning, colleagues. I bring to you this morning Senate Bill 67, which is part of the Lieutenant Governor's Common Sense Election Reform Package. I think we would all agree that free, fair, and secure elections are the bedrock of our democracy, and that the public's confidence in election integrity is critical to our system of government and the future of this country. Senate Bill 67 addresses voter identification required when requesting an absentee ballot by mail and permits in code the ability of the Georgia Secretary of State to continue to maintain a web portal by which an elector can request an absentee ballot that the Secretary of State established under the authority granted during the public health state of emergency. Historically, we've had about 5% of our votes cast by absentee ballot through the mail. But due to the pandemic in 2020 and massive grassroots efforts by various partisan and nonpartisan groups, the November 2020 election saw this percentage rise to 25% roughly of the votes cast. And that's just over 1.3 million ballots. Going forward, I expect this practice to continue as elector habits have likely been permanently altered. This dramatic shift in the method people choose to vote makes it necessary for us to modernize our process to adapt to this shift in order to maintain ballot security. So what we had in 2020 is you had, of course, the 3 weeks of early in-person voting. You were able to request a ballot through the Secretary of State's portal, an absentee ballot, and vote by mail, or you could mail in a written ballot request and vote by mail, or you could email in a ballot request to your County Board of Elections. Under the portal, you have to put in your Georgia driver's license number or your state-issued Department of Driver Services ID number and your date of birth and your address. That's all that's required to get a ballot through the portal. If you wanted to mail in a ballot request, you don't provide that same information. You do not provide an ID number, a personal ID number. You sign it, or potentially a family member signs the ballot request, or your caregiver, if you're disabled, signs the ballot request. So you can see, and then of course if you vote in person, you actually show your ID to the poll worker when you vote in person. So you can see there's inconsistencies there. When you mail in a ballot request and you're trying to verify the elector is who they say they are, the poll workers are having to try to match the signature on the ballot request to the signature that's on the voter registration card or on file. Well, that's hard to do, first of all, because a lot of people register to vote when they get their driver's license number, and you sign your name on that little digital screen, and your signature oftentimes really doesn't look like your actual signature that you do on a daily basis. Or you could run into the situation where a family member mailed in the ballot request, which is totally legal, and so the signature would be a moot point in that case, or if a caregiver did it, or if you did it online. So the signature match is not a good way to verify who the voter is. So this bill, Senate Bill 67, would require you to put on the application your driver's license number, your Georgia driver's license number, or your Department of Driver Services ID number on the application. The Secretary of State's office and the county boards of election have that information on file. They can verify that unique personal identification number to what they have on file, and then send you your ballot. The second part of the bill codifies what we had established during the pandemic, during the public health crisis. It allows the Secretary of State to continue to maintain the web portal access for requesting a ballot. In the event that you do not have a driver's license or a personal ID number, there is a list of other types of ID that you can send in with your ballot request. You can send in a copy of your military ID, your passport, various other things. This bill does still comply with the Help America Vote Act, which is a federal law. It complies with that. But I want to be clear, the Secretary of State's office tells me that of the voter registration rolls, on the rolls, 97% of Georgia's registered voters have either a Georgia driver's license number or a state-issued ID number, 97%. So that leaves 3% that do not. This bill provides for that, but if you have 25% of the people electing to vote by mail or electing to vote absentee, so it's only 25% of that 3%. There's all kind of ways. A personal ID is free from the Department of Driver Services. You can, of course, if you don't have a copy machine, that issue's been brought up. You can use your smartphone, take a picture of your ID and a picture of your ballot request, and email that in to your Board of Elections. You can get somebody to carry you to the library to make a copy. I feel like this is a very common sense measure to get the county boards of elections out of the middle of trying to process this massive amount of absentee ballots and verifying signatures before they are able to send them a ballot. It's a lot more efficient and a lot more secure. With that, Mr. President, if there are any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer them.
Chair recognizes the Rules Chairman for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Gill.
Yes, sir.
Isn't it true that if you're unable to afford a proper ID, that the state will pay for one or give you one at the driver's license services?
That's correct, yes, sir.
Thank you.
That's in Code Section 40-5-103, Part D.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 10th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the senator yield?
Yes, sir.
Senator, I'm trying to kind of understand some of the provisions in the bill, and I see that the Secretary of State's office has been directed to create a portal. Is that correct?
They weren't directed to do it. They did do it under the public health state of emergency with an executive order. It's not in code currently. This would codify that.
And Senator, can you explain, if you will continue to yield,
yes, sir,
exactly how this portal would work and how would an average Georgian use it?
So it already exists. I actually personally used it in the November election to request a ballot from my wife and I. So it's very easy to use. You go to the Secretary of State's website, you click on Request a Ballot, You put in your name, your address, and your driver's license number. And I actually received my ballot within about 2 days of doing that. The ballots are mailed out from the County Board of Elections. It also has the added benefit of the elector is the one keying in the information instead of a clerk, and so there's less opportunity for errors, and it lessens the workload also on the Board of Elections. So it's something I think that worked very, very well, and it's something I think, again, Georgia businesses have been real resilient and nimble and adjusted their practices to COVID. We've seen things that we never had tried before that we discovered worked pretty well. This is a case where something we had to do because of COVID ends up being very convenient and a good process, and we want to continue allowing the Georgia voters to have that option. Again, you've got a multitude of options if you want to vote. You can wait and vote on Election Day if you'd like to. A lot of people prefer to do that. But if you want to vote in advance, this is an easy way to get your ballot.
Senator, thank you for that explanation. 2 issues. How would that process work with the requirement, the added requirement of a photo ID?
A photo ID is not required if you request a ballot through the portal, and it's not required in the legislation I'm proposing to you today. The only reason you would have to have a photo ID is if you do not have a Georgia driver's license or you do not have a Department of Driver Services issued ID.
So, Senator,
it's kind of like, so what this is getting to is instead of trying to verify the person by their signature, you're using a personal identification number. And the personal identification number is not too unlike what you use with your ATM card or other type of online services you might do or in-person services. So it's a unique ID for that voter. It happens to be the Georgia driver's license number or their personal ID number issued by the state.
And if the senator would yield?
Yes, sir.
Senator, I'm referring to those 3% that may not be able to input one of those ID numbers. How would they then, if they wanted to request an absentee ballot, don't have a photo ID, how would they use this portal, or would they have to go through the normal channels as we've had before? That's my question, Senator.
So if they do not have a driver's license number or a state-issued ID, first of all, they could go to the nearest Department of Driver Services and get a state-issued ID for free. Secondly, they could mail in a ballot request and not use the portal. And they would then need to provide a copy of some other form of ID, which I can read you the list if you'd like me to of what other acceptable forms are, but a U.S. passport, a military ID, any kind of photo ID issued by the United States government or the state of Georgia. There's a list of about probably 7 or 8 things.
And Senator Yield, for a final question, please.
Yes, sir.
So just make sure I understand. So that 3% did not have some kind of ID, they would be required to get one before they could use the portal and access it. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, unless there's future, yes. Currently, I think that's the case. Yes, sir.
Senator, do you see that as creating an issue?
I guess, Senator, the portal is going to work for 97% of the voters if they want to use the portal. The 3%, I don't think we need to do away with the portal because it's very convenient and efficient. I don't think we need to do away with the portal just because 3% haven't gotten an ID.
And a final question, Senator, on line 117 of your bill, I see that you're eliminating the provision of ballot. Is that correct?
No, sir. I'm eliminating the signature match requirement for the ballot request application. And because I'm eliminating the signature match requirement, that whole section is not applicable. That section deals with if the signature does not match, they are to send a provisional ballot to the elector. But they're not going to be matching the signature under this measure. So that section is irrelevant to this.
And Senator, I'm speaking to the 3% that you said do not have this ID. How would they vote?
So they can vote in person. They can go down and vote early in person, or they can vote on election day in person. If they want to vote by mail, they can include a copy of one of the acceptable forms of identification with their ballot application. They can do that through the mail, or they can do that through an email.
And I'm sorry, Senator, because that just brings up another question. I said it was the last, it really wasn't. But if you're eliminating this provision, starting on line 17 for that signature match, is that problematic for those who may not have an ID?
Are you referring to line 117 or 118?
117 through 125, all of those that you deleted in this legislation. It really
And
goes
state
on
your
to
question
130.
again, because I think I've answered it a couple of times
I'm
already.
speaking on
but
behalf of that 3% that you stated do not have an ID. And I'm trying to understand what kind of hurdles that 3% would jump through in order to be able to, one, access an absentee ballot, and two, to vote with signature match since you've eliminated it.
I don't understand how I haven't already answered that, but again, they can go down to the Board of Elections for 3 weeks and vote early in person. That's one way those 3% can vote. And the vast majority of them, that's how they vote, based on our, the patterns we've seen. Normally only 5% decide to vote through the mail. This past year, it jumped up to 25%, but still, that's a pretty small percentage. So 75% of that 3%, if they vote, they're going to vote in person. Not all the 3% even vote. I'm just saying on the registration rolls, 97% have a Georgia-issued ID number. That's why this is a good way to verify identity, because it captures the vast, vast majority. That 3%, they probably, maybe they don't even vote. But if they do vote, they can go early in person and vote. They can go on election day and vote, or they can mail in a ballot request with a copy of a photo ID.
Senator, thank you for your responses.
Thank you.
Does the senator continue to yield?
No, sir, I don't. Is there any more questions? I think I've worked this to death, really, but I yield the well. I'd ask for your favor. Thank you.
Senator has yielded the well. Chair recognizes the senator from the 41st to speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to speak in opposition to this bill for really just one simple reason, which I think we could have fixed if we hadn't engrossed it. Lines 56 through 59 have been taken out. They've been removed. And it's the provision that allows, as the senator from the 20th actually talked about, it allows a caregiver to be able to sign on behalf of someone who cannot sign for themselves. So the senator from the 20th talked about that provision, but in fact it has been removed from this code. And so I stand on behalf of the thousands of Georgia citizens who require a caregiver or someone else who is not related to them to fill out their absentee ballots on their behalf. And the last thing that I will say is that the senator from the 20th suggests that an ID from DDS is free. However, according to the code, Article 1 of Chapter 5 of Title 40 of our official code, in fact, if you are a pauper, if you are poor, an ID costs you $5. So it is not free in order to get an ID. I yield the well.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 9th to speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I did have a question for the senator from the 20th. And first of all, I oppose this bill for various reasons, other than among which it's unnecessary. But I have a question about the inconsistent. It seems to be inconsistent. We can all agree that when you go and vote, you show a photo ID. They're able to look at that photo ID and match to see if it's you. My question was, how is a photocopy with an absentee ballot helpful? Because when you go to vote, the person has to look at you. You know, the poll worker has to look at you, verify your ID that is you. So how is this verifying? How is this fixing the inconsistency? It would be impossible to determine via a photocopy or, you know, something that you are mailing in or uploading that is the actual person that is sending it in. You can't match the faces. So this just seems inconsistent and irrelevant. The other question that I had is, as we're talking about modernizing, and I was trying to get clear, are they able to upload that voter ID from the Secretary of State's website? How it states in the bill, this is for first-time voters. A lot of these first-time voters are kids. They are using technology, and we're asking them to photocopy, you know, send in a photocopy. So I think you did kind of clarify that it can be at the discretion of the county boards where they can, you know, take a snapshot and maybe send that in. But my question is, are we going to have that capability on the Secretary of State's website? Because that seems to be an easy way to do it, and it puts us, you know, going forward, not backwards. This is the age of technology, and we're talking photocopies. I yield the will.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 6th to speak to Senate Bill 67.
Thank you, Mr. President. There are a few issues that I do want to point out. I'm unsure why we are taking out the signature match altogether now. If the purpose of this bill is to increase security, why not leave it in? Indeed, the states that have moved to complete vote-by-mail programs use signature match systems themselves. But they've strengthened them, and they've actually used technology to make them more accurate. So I'm not sure why we're saying that we want security and we're trying to move in that direction and then actually strip out one of the ways that we've been able to secure the vote in the past. Also, with respect to subsection F that was stricken out, not only is it a problem with respect to having caregivers aid those that are disabled apply for absentee ballots, as the senator from the 41st indicated, but there's also an issue with respect to fraud, right? Like, we want to know the identity of people who are helping folks fill out applications for ballots, don't we? I mean, that was the whole situation in North Carolina with ballot harvesting to some extent. So it's like we've actually taken out a couple of sections in this code that actually were there specifically for security and to make sure that the vote was secure. So I'm not quite sure. It's kind of like, yeah, we're going to do this to make things more secure and add more burden, but at the same time, we're going to take out what we've been using for years. And not, you know, and not leave it in. And then finally, a few years ago, I was counsel on a case that was brought against the Secretary of State, specifically for the release of the private data of 6.5 million voters in the state. So security numbers, driver's license numbers, date of birth, permanent residence, full legal name, all released to the public. I have a real issue in terms of us requesting or asking that people take a photocopy of their identification that has all of their information on it, right? And then sending it through the mail to the local elections office. There's nothing in this bill that actually addresses the protections that would need to be in place with respect to voter and consumer identifying information. And based on the way the state and other government actors have dealt with our personal information in the past, I would say that this is incredibly problematic. I yield the well.
Senator, you have questions? She yields the well. Chair recognizes the senator from the 26th to speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, I'm a lot older than most of you, but the gentleman from the 15th, the gentleman from the 24th, the gentleman from the 23rd, and the minority leader, we have age on us. And the young lady from the 3rd. Y'all know what happened back during the day. Let's make no mistake about what this bill is about. The election did not turn out the way you wanted it to turn out. That's what it's about. When you talk about ID match, the absentee ballot, the signature goes into the county board of elections. They cross it if you got a driver's license or any other records they have, and if they have a question, then they call you and send you an official document asking you to come in to verify. Now, I'm a blues singer, and I like rhythm and blues. And 2 songs go with what you're doing. One by the Isley Brother, Here We Go Again. And one by Teddy Pendergrass that said, wake up everybody, there's no more sleeping in bed, no more backward thinking, time for thinking ahead. Then let me tell you what you're doing. And I'm surprised at the gentleman that came down here to speak on behalf of this bill, especially where you're from. Especially where you're from. You know, from Perry to Byron, Georgia, there are folks who don't have ways of transportation to get into places. They got to pay somebody. But what this bill reminds me of, you know, you got a car, and you got a rear view mirror in the car, and the rear view mirror tells you where you're coming from. And if you don't know where you're coming from, how you know where you're going? But it reminds me of the election of 1876, when President Grant was supposed to run for a 3rd term and he wouldn't run. And they had the Republican convention, and they were trying to find somebody to run. Had a guy by the name of Blaine, but they didn't think he could win. And they went and got Governor Rutherford Hayes out of Ohio. And for the Democrats, it was a guy by the name of Samuel J. Tilden from New York. And Tilden was beating Hayes by 260,000 popular votes. And what happened? In Washington, D.C., there was a hotel owned by a black man by the name of Wormley. And Hayes was losing the race, one of the closest presidential elections. That's where we have the Electoral College now. They formed a commission back then. And it was Florida, Louisiana, and South Carolina. And prior to then, South Carolina was more populated by blacks than whites. And yes, we were in the halls of Congress. And what happened, Hayes went to a black man's hotel and cut a deal with the southern states. And they pulled out the federal troops. And when they pulled out the federal troops, in his inaugural speech, Hayes said that it's time to let the South run the government. And when they did that, they put out federal troops. And that's when we had Jim Crow and folks got lynched. In South Carolina, had a group called the Red Shirts. And they were supposed to kill them. And they created ballots. And folks were voting on it, didn't know what they were voting on. They gave Tillman the majority of the votes in South Carolina. Now, I would be negligent in my duties representing the 26th Senatorial District to go for this malarkey. That's what it is. But not only what you're doing, you're getting ready to spend state money to fight. Because we're going to fight. Folks voted in the election. A lot of us voted against Trump. And a lot of folks that look like you voted against Trump. And here we're going to perpetuate this big lie, fraud. If the Secretary of State hadn't recorded what Trump said, Trump lied on him too. He got no problem lying. I just tell you, sad to come down here all these years when you can walk up on the 4th floor, on the high side of the gallery, and you can look at the history of Georgia and those of us of color, how we've been elected. Now, it's amazing. I didn't think I had to come to the well after 45 years of being in this body. And I probably had a lot of friends before today. But I want to tell you, we're going to fight. There's no question about what's going to happen. And you're going to spend taxpayers' money trying to defend it. As I go back home and I look in that mirror and see where I came from, there's one thing about being in politics. You make friends, and sometimes you make enemies. But I will tell you one thing about David Lucas, that I'm going to fight you with all the vigor I can. Because I will not go back home and tell those folks who voted that I took away the right for you to vote. And that's what this bill is about. Every last one of the election bills is about the election didn't turn out the way y'all want, and you want to perpetuate the lie that Trump told. Well, if I don't fight you, if I don't fight you, I hope my tongue cleave to the top of my mouth. And the cutting power of my right hand ceases to be. And then, that's when we'll know the true words of what Martin Luther King said. Free at last, free at last. Thank God about it. We're free at last.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 42nd to speak to the measure.
President, I wanted to raise somewhat small issue, but it could be impactful. And I was trying to get an answer to this, but was unable to ask a question of the author. What we need to figure out is whether expired Georgia driver's licenses would be permissible for for putting the number in on the application. And the reason we need to know that is that's not in 212417 C. It is in 212417 A1, but that is not referenced in this bill. So it's unclear to me if we then disallow expired driver's licenses from serving as the proper form of ID. And if we do, that actually is a huge problem as it relates to our permanent absentee rollover list. So I just wanted to flag that. Another issue that I think we should have cleared up and allowed for perhaps an amendment to make that clear. But of course, we are not permitted to amend this bill. I'm happy to yield for any questions.
You have no questions.
Thank you. Yield the well.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 20th to close debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I want to say what deep affection I have for the senator from the 26th. I've known him since I was 7 or 8 years old. Have great respect for him. I disagree with his portrayal of what this bill is about. It's not about disenfranchising voters. It's not about overly burdening the electorate. It is about efficiency and security and election integrity and allowing the Georgia public to have confidence in the vote. A few things that were brought up that I want to address. Lines 56 through 59 were struck because this measure gets away from the signature match requirement. So an elector that is unable to fill out or sign their own application, they shall make their mark with a witness. That's just not necessary under this measure. I don't know how you would really match somebody's mark anyway, but because we're doing away with the signature match requirement, that's not necessary anymore. It does not in any way prevent a person that is disabled from submitting a ballot application, just like any other voter could under this measure. I want to make sure that I'm clear that current Georgia code provides for a free, no cost, I don't know how else to say it, no charge personal identification. If you look in Code Section 40-5-103, paragraph D, little d, the department shall not be authorized to collect a fee for an identification card from a person who swears under oath that it is they need the ID to be able to vote in a primary or election in Georgia, or who provides evidence that he or she is registered to vote. So there's no charge for a voter ID. Again, this just is a common sense measure to adjust our current process for requesting an absentee ballot, not casting the ballot, requesting an absentee ballot to reflect the web portal that works so well, and to get the Board of Election people out of the middle of trying to verify elections when they received over 1,300,000 absentee ballots. I mean, that's so it's an efficiency measure and a security measure. It is not about disenfranchising anybody. Thank you very much. I yield the well.
What purpose does the senator from the 10th rise?
President.
State your inquiry.
Mr. President, isn't it true that this body is not in the business of disenfranchising voters? And admittedly, the author of this legislation has already said that 3% would be disenfranchised.
It's for each and every member to discern.
Do you agree with that, Mr. President?
It's for each and every member to discern. Do you have additional parliamentary inquiries?
I do, Mr. President. I understand it's for each and every member to discern. But what I see, the data that I heard from the author of this bill from the 20th stated 3%, but I know in the Black and Latino community, that percent is much higher than 3%. It could be as high as 10 to 15%. So my inquiry, Mr. President, isn't this bill directed toward Black and Latino voters, and effectively this bill would suppress their vote and not allow them the opportunity to vote or to request that absentee ballot, which was very effective in the most recent
It's the chair's
elections.
thought that that's not the intent of the measure, but each and every member can make that determination.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. For what purpose does the senator from the 20th rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Mr. President, it is not true that I forgot to clarify the question on an expired driver's license. An expired Georgia driver's license number would satisfy the requirements of requesting an absentee ballot under this bill.
Thank you for clarifying the senator from the 40 seconds question. All right. The question's on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to adoption of the committee substitute? Chair hears none, and the committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? The chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. Questions on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. Have all senators voted? Mr. Secretary, please close the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 35 and the nays are 18. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. Mr. Secretary, can you please read the caption to Senate Bill 188?
Senate Bill 188 by Senator Cowsert of the 46th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 2 of Title 21 of the OCGA relating to elections and primaries generally so as to provide for an election results reporting system to be established and maintained by the Secretary of State. The Senate Committee on Ethics recommends that this bill do pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Burns of the 23rd. This completes the order, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 46th to speak to Senate Bill 188.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, it's a pleasure to be here with you today to talk about this important issue for Georgia. I'd like to thank the President of the Senate for allowing me to presents this bill to you that he fully supports. I'd like to thank our President Pro Tem, who's second signer, Majority Leader, who's third signer, and many other members who all agree that this provision will help instill public confidence in our election system. I don't know about the rest of you, but I have never received the number of constituent contacts, phone calls, emails, letters on any subject matter like I have after the election this fall. And there's really a crisis in confidence in the public on the validity and integrity of the election returns. Now, a lot of it might just be sour grapes, people unhappy that they lost. And that's democracy. You win some and you lose some. If a candidate gets out there and persuades the majority of the public to vote for them, then they deserve to have that seat in office. And the losing side better get out and work harder, get better candidates, vote more if they want to turn things around. We saw this some years ago when President Trump won. The minority party went crazy. Wasn't fair, unfair elections, et cetera, and you heard the same thing that now the majority party's hearing when people were unhappy with the results. In both cases, you had citizens that didn't trust the validity of the election returns. They couldn't believe them. And I just heard I enjoyed the senator from the 26's performance there about how horrible things were back in the day. I was really surprised to know, I knew he was older than some of us, as he said, but I didn't know he was around in 1876 for that election that he referenced. That shows how long back in history we've had these complaints. And you made some interesting remarks about the Jim Crow laws and voter suppression, particularly against African Americans in our past. But as you said, it's no more time for looking in the past, it's time for looking ahead. And if you look at these election results from this November and January, you're going to find the facts of the matter are that we just had the highest percentage of African Americans registered to vote that were eligible to register. We had the highest percentage of registered African American voters vote in history. We had the highest number of African American votes cast. We have elected, the state of Georgia has elected an African American United States Senator. So with all due respect to the past, in this present day, the state of Georgia is not suppressing African American votes. This bill doesn't deal at all with the casting of a vote or eligibility to cast a vote. So don't come at me with any voter suppression arguments, because this doesn't do a thing about the vote. It's about the reporting of the votes. Because there was so much delay and changes in numbers and calculations that people were like, wait a second, how do we even know how many votes were cast? Somebody needs to be able to tell us this, to advise us, so we have some confidence in this tabulation process. Senate Bill 188 requires the Secretary of State to establish and maintain an election results reporting system, and for that to be readily accessible to the citizens of our state. It doesn't say a thing about the casting of the ballots. It just says, let's have a reporting system so we have transparency, so our citizens can go online and see how the vote's coming, how many votes were cast. It requires the number of ballots cast by type, by precinct, to be reported to this election results system. Local county election superintendents shall report as soon as possible after the close of the polls, the number of absentee ballots received. Recall, you can't receive absentee ballots after the close of the poll other than the military provisional ballots. You got to tell the number of absentee ballots that were issued and that were received by precinct the day of the primary, the day of the general election, whatever type of election's being held, report that. You have to enter the number of in-person ballots, the number of absentee ballots received, and the number of provisional ballots cast prior to uploading your vote totals. Because people are sitting out here worried, now, what was under that table in the Fulton County precinct? Are these new votes being found? We kept hearing things in the press. Well, they have discovered another batch of votes that hadn't been counted yet. Tell us how many votes cast before you start totaling the votes, basically. That's not complicated. That doesn't suppress anything. That gives confidence in the integrity of the system that nobody is messing with the ballots. Before you start counting them, reporting your totals, tell us how many were cast. That's all this bill does. I'm happy to answer any questions that any of my fellow senators might have, but I want to assure everybody that this is simply transparency. It's instilling confidence in the general public as to how many votes got cast, and then let's find out what the vote totals are instead of having moving targets on those numbers. Mr. President, I yield the well for any questions.
Chair recognizes the minority leader for a question.
Senator Yield.
I'll be happy to the minority leader.
Senator, I know I've said to you before that we can all sit back and tell people what they should be doing and how to do them. But are there any extra resources for this work to go on?
I don't think so. I mean, this is just the vote returns. I mean, I can tell you this. Every time I go vote, when I walk in my precinct, I ask the poll workers, how's it looking today? What's our turnout? Are people voting? They tell me the exact number, because when you register in there, they're logging you in and they're keeping count. You have a number. Mm-hmm. So that's not a burden on them that they're not doing instantaneously, and they also have obviously had to record the number of absentee ballots. My second question is, has Amy voted? Checking on my wife, because if they say no, I call her and say, you better get down. Have my kids voted? Call them out by names, and they can tell me who's voted and the number. So this doesn't add any burden on them other than to load that information into this system that the Secretary of State will manage to have transparency for all of Georgia.
You continue to yield?
I'll be happy to yield.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 27th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Chairman, do you yield?
I do yield.
Thank you. I'm not a sharp attorney like you are, so I just want to put this in maybe elementary school terms and make sure I'm understanding what you're proposing that we do here. You're not proposing that we change anything with how people vote, where they vote, when they vote, who they vote for, how their vote is counted. Isn't it true that you are proposing that we establish...
You're right. It doesn't change any of that.
Do you further yield?
I do.
Isn't it true that you are essentially asking us to establish the denominator first?
That's true.
So we know how many total votes are outstanding, and then we count.
Exactly.
And as we're counting, the numerator changes, and eventually the numerator will match the denominator, and then we know that we're done. So conceivably what this will do will prevent confusion from anybody going to bed at 11 o'clock on election night and saying, my person has won the election, and waking up only to find out 5 days later that there were really 450,000 votes outstanding, but nobody knew it because we don't have this data. Isn't that true, Senator?
You know how many votes are outstanding, even if they have not yet been tabulated and counting. When you go to bed on election night, you're going to know how many ballots cast.
And, Senator, do you further yield?
Yes.
Isn't it true that the poll books, the process for checking in with in-person voting already has this information for us? To your point, the scanners have that number visibly that everybody sees. So really the only thing we're asking people to do is to establish the amount of absentee by mail votes that have come in, which frankly would be a good practice to be doing anyway. And if they do that ahead of time, like again, I think would be good practice, all that we're asking them to do is look at the absentee votes received that day, add that to the total, look at the people that voted in person that day, upload that information, and then they can begin to count.
That's correct. And the senator from the 6th has a bill coming up after mine that will even further expedite that process by allowing those absentee ballots to be scanned in beforehand, because we are evolving that way. We're voting more by absentee with this pandemic and other conveniences, so there's no reason to delay voting those. But you're right. You know on election day how many are cast. Just upload it into this system and let the public know.
Thank you, Senator.
Chair recognizes the minority whip for a question.
Thank you, Senator Yield.
I gladly yield to the minority whip.
Just one quick question. So are we saying that we'd have absolutely no ability to see any totals until the total vote count is actually there?
That's right.
Is that what we're saying?
That's it. That's it. That's all it's doing. Let us know how many votes were cast before you start telling us the vote totals.
So when we were saying, finish Senator further, Yield?
I do.
So when we were talking about the fact that there may be new batches that are coming in, unfortunately, that might have been a day or two later. Under this bill, will we see no totals for a day or two before all the batches are counted, so to speak?
No, you got to report the batches on election day. Let us know how many were cast. There shouldn't be batches coming in after election day.
Just Senator further, Yield?
I do.
And that I understand, but if it was similar to this situation where unfortunately you may have had that happen, I'm just trying to clarify that no one would have any totals at all until all those numbers are in. Is that correct?
You wouldn't upload any vote totals. You could have begun counting, but you can't upload them into this reporting system until you first say, what is it, the denominator? You know, how many of the total are there? Yes, Senator.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 6th for a question.
Thank you. Will the senator yield?
I yield.
So as you indicated, the bill that I have coming up deals with expediting the process, because I think we all agree that the quicker that we can get the information out, the better.
Agreed.
Okay. With respect to this, I think one of the issues that I have in terms of, and maybe it's how it's worded, is that it's my understanding that right now all of this information is available to the public in terms of publicly available through the Secretary of State.
They're not required by law to be. That's what this code section will do. The Secretary of State does have an election results reporting system. They're not required to have that.
Okay, so with respect to this, I think the issue that I'm trying to get at is the uploading of the totals until you put that denominator, as the other senator said, into the system. With respect to that, you would agree with me that many times provisional ballots, we don't know if they're going to count or not until the end of the week.
True.
Okay.
That's why you just tell the number of provisional ballots cast.
But with respect to that, then a provisional ballot isn't necessarily cast unless it's considered.
It's cast. It may just not be accepted or received. I mean, if it's disputed for whatever reason, maybe the voter doesn't live in that precinct or doesn't live in the state or whatever.
Okay. And then also in terms of military absentee ballots that come in after the fact. So with respect to the way that this is worded, arguably you can't upload totals until the military ballots to the 3 days after.
No, on line 25, it asks them to enter the number of absentee ballots issued and returned as of the close. So you at least know how many are out there, and whatever military ballots can still, some of them can come in after the close of the polls. You got to let people, though, know how many have been issued. And then tell the numbers that have already been returned, and it may be some small outstanding number left that didn't come in. Those, when they come in, if they're a military ballot, they'll be counted. If they're not going to be counted if they hadn't been received. by the close of the polls.
Will the senator further yield?
I yield.
And with respect to locals, elections, officials, what has been their response to this in terms of
No
saying?
opposition whatsoever.
Have you spoken to any of them directly?
I haven't personally, but I've had several other senators that have mentioned that they've talked to theirs. This was raised in committee and have been told that no problem, no opposition, no resistance.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator, and I appreciate your efforts to, your bipartisan support of this bill as well as your bill and the Lieutenant Governor's package.
Do you continue to yield?
I yield.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 42nd for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the senator yield?
Yes, I will, Madam Chair.
Senator, I certainly applaud your intentions in this legislation. As a matter of fact, I tweeted on election night, or maybe it was a couple of days later as the results were slow. I tweeted something like, maybe we should just not report any results until we have all the numbers.
Great, and so this is your bill.
So,
I welcome
and then
your
I
support.
realized, and then, isn't it true, I realized that that would just cause a lot more angst in the public, because then there's less transparency, actually, and it true, the fear would be that it would actually have the contrary effect
I don't
of people
see how
feeling
that-
like stuff is being hidden from them, which I sort of belatedly realized myself.
I don't see how that could be any rational interpretation of this. To let people know how many votes have been cast is not duplicitous at all. I mean, that just lets them know. And the people realize sometimes it takes time to count the ballots, but just know how many people participated and their ballots were received. And they don't expect instantaneous results. Now, in-person voting, there should be no delay in uploading those. But first, tell us how many you got, as they report the ones that voted in person, and then when the absentee ballots are counted, report those. I think there's a code section that requires that counting to be in public. And requires it to begin at least at noon the day after the election and to continue day to day until completed. Just fill in the gaps as they come and tell us what the target number is, and then how many of those votes went Democratic, how many went Republican, how many went independent, or left it blank.
Will the senator continue to yield?
I will.
So on that point, and following up on the senator from the 6th question about provisional and military ballots, is it true, is it the case that under this legislation, counties would not be able to report any results, not only as it relates to the military ballots, but actually from the ballots that, if you're in a large county, if people put ballots in the drop boxes, those are eligible to be counted, and that could be a more significant number. Although I actually think that the military ballots can actually be or military and overseas, actually can be not a nominal number as well. And so that means that for absentee ballots put in drop boxes or arriving in the last mail delivery on election day, we would not get any results for, a couple days probably while those got processed.
As far as the vote totals, you're accurate. As far as the number of votes cast, put in that drop box, received in the U.S. mail, you know those numbers, and all you got to do is report them. This is just telling you, report to the Secretary of State's website how many went in that drop box, how many people voted live, how many had some kind of dispute and had to provide a provisional ballot that whether or not it's going to be counted will be determined later. Give us the totals. Let people have peace of mind that there's nothing being done in the dark of night.
Will you yield for a couple more questions?
I'm happy to yield.
Thank you. So essentially, the number is going to change because we're going to say this is how many people voted, but then later we're going to get additional ballots that will be counted or not in the case of the provisionals, counted or not in the case of the military and overseas UOCAVA voters, and counted or not in the case of all the drop box voters. So the number is definitely going to change.
You got it. You have figured out this
But,
legislation. I put it on 2 pages.
Is it your contention, Senator, that would make people less? I feel like there would be, explain to me why you don't think that might give birth to further conspiracy theories when we know the number will change.
Because on line 25, you have to enter the number of absentee ballots issued. Even if they're not returned yet, you got to tell the ones issued and the ones that have already been returned so people know what's the total possible number of votes here. So if their candidate is winning by 500 votes and there were only 300 absentee ballots issued that hadn't come back yet, game over. So people know that. And if there's more outstanding, then they're like, well, we're just going to have to hang in here and wait until whatever the time period by law allows those to be received and for the provisional ballots to be resolved to determine whether that person was up.
I understand that. Thank you for that. So you feel, you acknowledged, I believe, that this would delay getting any results for a while.
No. That's the thing. It has to be, the number of ballots has to be reported the day of the election. That's a whole different, this is reporting. Now, what you're referring to, there could be delay in the counting of the votes, but it's not like you're having to wait to count votes, beyond when you would ordinarily count them, because this number has to be reported on election day, how many ballots cast. So there's no reason to delay the counting or tabulation of the votes.
But even entering everything like you've got in C, that's a whole step that they don't have to do now. So certainly this would delay getting partial results because you would need to do all this, which you don't have to do right now before you release any results.
You're going to have already entered that data on election day. And you have to do that before you start releasing your vote totals. That's all this is making you do.
But
I mean, it
it
is
will
not
delay
complicated.
it, right, Senator?
No, I'm not going to agree to that. It
Okay.
doesn't delay anything beyond the time periods already provided by law.
Final question. So
okay.
we're building a system that we do not currently have, correct?
We're requiring it. I think the Secretary of State does have a vote report system because I've heard a lot of people, complain about they weren't able to get through to it or the numbers weren't timely reported, et cetera. The Secretary of State's office has this, but we're going to require it, and we're going to require the local election superintendents to enter data into it, report data to this system that's open to all citizens of Georgia, so we have transparency in voting.
My understanding, and please tell me if you think this is not correct or in question, is that the election night reporting system does not currently have this capability, so we would have to pay for upgrades to that system?
I'm afraid you misunderstand that I don't have any information to support that contention.
Okay, well, I've been told that several times, so I'm just curious how much that might cost the taxpayers.
I don't have an answer for that.
Thank you,
I would
Senator.
imagine it'd be negligible.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. And
Do you continue to yield?
Support. I'm happy to yield.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 34th for a question.
Thank you. Would the senator yield?
I certainly do.
And I think I just heard you clarify for me the intent of your bill. And my question was simply that your bill would not add additional revenue costs to the county nor the Secretary of State's office.
I
Is
don't
that
think
correct?
it does. I don't think it adds a dime to it.
It just seems to me, and I was sitting here, my light's been on for a while, and that was my question. And based on that back and forth, I still wasn't clear, but it is your testimony
That
it
is
should
my
not
belief
cost.
that it doesn't cost anything. It's
All
data
right.
that's already getting reported sooner or
Counties
later
nor
anyway.
Secretary of State.
That's
Counties
correct.
nor, okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 28th with a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator, do you yield?
I yield.
Senator, so I want to kind of tie Senate Bill 188 and Senate Bill 40 that we're going to do here shortly. And should Senate Bill 40 pass, and I do support that bill, we're going to allow our locals to start processing absentee ballots the second Monday prior to a primary election or runoff. Is that not true?
That's true, roughly 10 days in advance.
Okay, thank you. If you further yield.
I yield.
Would it not make sense if they started on the second Monday prior to the primary election or runoff to go ahead and start compiling a daily report of these types of ballots? If an absentee ballot comes in on that second Monday and then one comes in on Wednesday, they go ahead and compile a daily report so that come election day, all they have to do is report what showed up on election day. Is that not true?
I imagine they could do that. Whether that number should be disclosed or not is a question for another bill and another day, so I don't want to expand on this, but certainly makes sense that it makes that job easier. Whether they release the report of how many people have already voted or not, that's another policy decision.
Well, I'm just, if you'll further yield, I think the point I'm trying to ask is if they do this daily and they don't let it pile up until the last day, because we are saying in Senate Bill 188 that they have to have all these numbers to the Secretary of State by election night, and we know that all absentee ballots, whether they come by mail, whether they're handed to the clerks, or whether they're placed in a drop box, they have to, at 7 p.m. is the cutoff.
You're right. I follow you, and that would expedite the process. Okay. And I also support Senate Bill 40, which I think will help that.
Thank you.
You have no more questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well, and I ask each and one of you to support this. I think it would be a good signal to the state of Georgia that we are working to clarify our system, make it transparent, instill confidence for both parties. So I strongly encourage bipartisan support. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes the senator from the 36th to speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I hope to be brief, but I really feel compelled to come to the well. The bill that's just been presented by the author, his comments were full of statements like, I expect that, I would think so, I would imagine that'd be the case. Has there been a meeting with the Secretary of State, the person who is elected statewide, a constitutional officer, to run our elections? Has the Secretary of State come and testified on this bill, or have you had a meeting with him? Do you know what his systems are? You say you believe, the author says he believes that there's a system in place over there at the Secretary of State that could accept this information. And then it's troubling if you don't have answers to those questions, if you're imagining and you're thinking and you think, surely it would be that way. No. What does the Secretary of State tell you that he has on hand right now? What's the system? Would it require upgrading? What would that cost? And to what purpose would we spend the money to do it when I hear it repeatedly from the majority party that, and it was said in the House proceedings on election bills as well, that a lot of people don't have confidence in our election system. Well, you know, the big lie got told here for a good 6 months, running up to the presidential election. The big lie got told from the White House and then spread out through the echo chamber of the right wing that if this president doesn't win re-election, this is a rigged election. Period. Paragraph. No further. No questions accepted. That is indubitably the case. If this president doesn't win the election, then it's been a rigged election. Every one of us who knows that this was not a rigged election, the votes were counted over and over and over, I believe 3 to 4 times in this state. The president called down here and tried to get our Secretary of State to change the totals by 11,000 plus votes so that he could get enough votes to win Georgia. And that's I'm not making that up. I'm not imagining that. I'm not thinking that so. It was taped by our Secretary of State, and he released the tape because he expected that, in my opinion, that he might be misrepresented by the president about the nature of that call. And he was not the only election official down here that was called by that got the call from the White House about let's look around for some more votes, asking our election officials to figure out how to cook up a vote total to have him be able to put Georgia in the Trump column. Thankfully, our Secretary of State did not yield to that. But that big lie was told all the way up to January 6th, to the point of whipping up people to go into our Capitol and wage war. Lives lost. the hugest challenge to our democracy since the Civil War and secession, which was, by the way, about the same topic, and that is the ability of people of color and African American people to fully participate as equal citizens in our democracy. So when you all talk from the majority party about we've got to reassure people because they're thinking that there's something going wrong here, do you think about reassuring the African American voters of this state? We have a 33% black population in this state, the third highest in the nation. We are the state that's the home of Dr. Martin Luther King. We are the state that refused to seat Julian Bond when he got elected to the Georgia House because he opposed the Vietnam War. We have a lot of sins to atone for. So when we get up here and focus 30-some bills in this legislature on changing the voting laws, are we concerned in your hearts? Look into your hearts. Are you concerned about the message that you're sending to black citizens of this state? There's deep unease. There's deep unease about access to the ballot. We were the first state in the country in 2005, and a few of us were here then, to put in a photo ID. And we're always couching it that we're assuring the voters it's going to be a great new day and the vote's going to be safe and it's going to be honest and it's not going to be fraudulent. And they're relatively speaking, they're just virtually maybe 10 incidents or something that anybody's heard of voter fraud. That's not what's going on here. It was a big lie that got told, and I maintain that you continue to support the essence of that lie when you come with a raft of bills. And these are not the most onerous. We'll see worse. We see there's worse in the pipeline. But I just think we're challenged as leaders to take into account the history. We heard the senator from the 26th express his pain from a lifetime of having to battle for every inch that he gained in his ability to fully exercise his rights. We have the largest black caucus, maybe Mississippi's larger, in the nation. The Black Caucus, the legislative Black Caucus, is taking positions against these bills. And I just ask you to search your hearts about what damage you are doing when and my mailbox is flooded every day, and my phone calls and emails from people saying, please oppose these onerous voting laws, these voter suppression bills that are being passed down here. So when and let me just say one or two more things. I said it'd be short, and I'm sorry I'm not. But we say that we're sure these election boards in all 159 counties across the state, they can do this. Yeah, they can get this done on election day. Well, sure they can. They just do it, and they do it, and they send it in, and it's done. You know, I believe truly in your hearts that we underfund the election process. It's fragile, it's underfunded, it's understaffed. It's 159 counties, each trying to get it together and pull off this thing, and we had the highest turnout ever of African American voters. We had exponential increase in Asian American voters. We had a huge turnout. Yay, isn't that great? But these election boards are slammed to the wall to keep up with all of this. They're underfunded and they're understaffed. But we so I would say to you, think very seriously about supporting a bill that puts another mandate on our county election boards without a dime to increase their budgets so that they can get the job done, without another dime to the Secretary of State to set up a system to take all this information in. Think about all of that, and above all, what message are we sending Georgia when we have 30-plus voting bills that don't really cure the problem that the senator from the 40th pointed out, and that is it's leadership that reestablishes confidence in our system, not a raft of bills that frighten people to death that they're going to create, and in many cases they do create barriers to accessing the ballot. These are weighty questions. And again, as the senator from the 40th stated earlier in the well, we have a huge raft of challenges in our state. We're in the midst of a pandemic. We've lost 500,000 people in the country. Is this where we spend all our time and intentionality? Or do we get on with the business of covering people with access to health care, dealing with the pandemic, getting the vaccine out, funding public health, funding the election process? If you came with some bills to more richly fund our election process for the counties, that would be a real enhancement. So I say to you, I think we're on the wrong path, and if all of us had spoken out a lot earlier, before January 6th, and told the truth about our elections in Georgia, we could have possibly, if that had happened across the country, particularly from the GOP, you could have possibly waylaid this big lie that too many people thought was the truth. Thank you. I'll yield the well if there are no questions.
You have no questions. Chair recognizes the senator from the 33rd to speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President, my fellow senators, colleagues, friends, and y'all. I just want to caution us before we think about changing these election laws. You know, everybody's in a rush to try and change something that's been working well for a number of years. Kind of reminds me when I was stationed with the Air Force in Louisiana. Everybody thought they knew how to make gumbo. And you know what? When you have too many cooks making the stew doesn't taste that well at all. So I want to caution us about trying to make a mad rush to change all these voting bills, because everybody has a plan, but like Mike Tyson used to say, everybody has a plan until they get hit, and we don't know how we're going to reap what we sow with these bills and how it's going to hit us. So I want to encourage everybody to use caution about trying to change what's been working. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Thank you, Senator. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against Senate Bill 46? Senator wish to close. 188, sorry. He waives. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? The chair hears none and the main question is ordered. Questions on the passage of the bill. All those in favor vote yea. Opposed nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. Have all senators voted? Have all senators voted? Looks like we might have one in the hallway. Hallway's clear. Have all senators voted? Mr. Secretary, please close the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 34, the nays are 18. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Mr. Secretary, can you please read the caption of Senate Bill 40?
Senate Bill 40 by Senator Jordan of the 6th, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 2 of Title 21 of the OCGA relating to elections and primaries generally so as to revise the time and method for opening and tabulating absentee ballots, to provide for an effective date, to provide for related matters, to repeal conflicting laws, and for other purposes. The Senate Committee on Ethics recommends that this bill do pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Burns of the 23rd. Do pass by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 6th. Oh, we got a substitute, sorry. False alarm.
The Senate Ethics Committee offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 40, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 2 of Title 21 of the OCGA relating to elections and primaries generally, so as to revise the time and method for opening and tabulating absentee ballots, to provide for an effective date, to provide for related matters, to repeal conflicted laws, and for other purposes. This completes the order, Mr. President.
Now the chair recognizes the senator from the 6th. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a fairly straightforward bill. It's intended to basically assist local election officials by allowing them to start processing the absentee ballots before Election Day. Currently, under our law, local boards of election, local election officials aren't allowed to even open the envelopes that the absentee ballots are in until 7 a.m. of Election Day, which then the processing of those is so time consuming because you have to scan them in. After we saw millions of people vote last year via absentee, I think we understand that that really has delayed results coming in, which then, of course, gives people time to kind of think that there's something up or that maybe local elections boards aren't being transparent. So this really is to help folks at the local level, but also so that we can get results out to people as quickly as possible. So I will yield for questions if there are any.
Senator, you have no questions.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 33rd to speak to the measure.
Good thing I put on my deodorant. Thank you, Mr. President, my fellow senators, colleagues, friends, and y'all. I just want to encourage you to support the senator from the 6th on this bill. She's worked very hard on the bill to try and get it passed, and I just want to congratulate her on bringing the bill to our attention, and if you can, give her your support. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Thank you, Senators. Any other senator wish to speak for or against Senate Bill 40? The chair sees none. The question is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to adoption of the committee substitute? Chair hears none, and the committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. The question is on the passage of the bill. All those in favor vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. Have all senators voted? Mr. Secretary, please close. Oh, we got one more? Mr. Secretary, please close the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 53, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. Mr. Secretary, can you please read the caption to Senate Bill 184?
Senate Bill 184 by Senator Caucus of the 46th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 2 of Title 21 of the OCGA relating to elections and primaries generally so as to revise the time for input and credit for voting data, to provide for sanctions for failure to meet deadlines. The Senate Committee on Ethics recommends that this bill do pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Burns of the 23rd. This completes the order, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 46th to speak to Senate Bill 184. I'm gonna need eyeglasses soon. This stuff's getting harder to read by the year.
Thank you, Mr. President. I feel your pain. I'll pull my glasses out too in case this print shrinks up on me. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a one-page bill. Last one was two-page. This really does two things. After your votes are cast, current law requires the Board of Registrars or the Board of Elections, depending on which type of election supervision your county has, to create your voter history. They call it giving you voter credit by printing who voted in which elections. Obviously, it doesn't say how you voted, but it gives you credit for voting. Currently, they have 60 days to provide that data. This bill just changes the date to 30 days so we get more timely reporting of voting histories. It creates a penalty of $100 per day beyond that 30-day period for the local Board of Registrars to give this report. Now, this comes up in my mind. I also applaud the Lieutenant Governor supported this in his package and our leadership and the bipartisan support that we have on this. When it comes up, when these people that were so upset after the election, all the absentee ballots said, how do I know if my vote was even counted? I sent in an absentee ballot, but I don't know if they really counted it or not. This is how you know. The election histories of people get reported, and you can look and see, is your name on there as having voted? And if it is, you know they accepted or received your absentee ballot and tabulated it and counted it. Likewise, I've had people say, now how do I know somebody else didn't send in an absentee ballot and claim they were me? Because I started getting all these absentee ballot request forms in the mail. I got several of them. And I don't know if anybody else might have sent it in. It could have gone to an old address or whatever. How can I be sure somebody else didn't vote in my name in that last election? Well, this is how you find out. You go look at your voter history. Are you recorded as having voted or not? If you didn't send in a ballot and didn't go live and your name appears on the voting credit records as having voted, well, then you know fraud has been committed. Once again, this is just a transparency bill. It doesn't even require anything new that isn't already being done. It just makes them do it sooner. So we don't have all this uncertainty, these elections hanging over us for 60, 70 or more days. You know, numerous boards of election didn't give the voter credit information this year within the 60-day period required. It also lets you true up the vote, so to speak, when you're comparing the numbers of ballots that you reported having been cast with the number of voters that you gave credit for voting. So it's another thing just to give some assurance to our public, to our citizens, that there's integrity and fairness and accuracy in our vote tabulations. Now, you know, some of the arguments I keep hearing, it's almost like some of you are trying to find a reason to vote no, to justify your no votes on these bills. You know, all of these are fairly simple procedural changes that are just giving transparency and giving some type of confidence in the election results. And I'm just sitting here disappointed that the minority party is voting no on these things, except for the one bill that's brought by a minority party member, who I applaud for that, and I applaud the Lieutenant Governor for encouraging a bipartisan approach here. These are not controversial bills we're dealing with today. Let's give our citizens confidence once again in the accuracy of our vote tabulations. Mr. President, this is a simple one. I've explained it, I think, but I'm happy to take any questions before yielding the well.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 10th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the senator yield?
I yield.
Senator, I agree with you. There should be more bipartisan effort on some of these bills, and I'm really trying to get
Help
there.
me out. Help me. Here we go. Here's your chance.
Question for you. I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
All right. I'm
Question
working
for you.
you.
Have the VREs been consulted about this change from 60 to 90 days, the voter registration and election boards?
No, but the Paulding County Board of Election has and said they had no problem with it. You know, of course, this has been in the public domain now for a couple of weeks, and I've had no pushback again on this from any Board of Elections.
Senator, further yield?
I do.
Senator, has there any effort been made to reach out to any of these VREs just to get input? Sometimes those that serve in these capacities do not reach out to the state and voice their opposition because of the sensitive position they're in. And if you further yield, is there any data to suggest that they would be out of compliance and some would be charged $100 if they're not able to meet this 30-day window?
You got to remember that we're not putting any new burden on anybody here. It's something they're already doing. My understanding is the certifications of the votes happens before 30 days anyway. So they have to have the information available. They're just dragging their feet and reporting it. So I don't think it's any additional cost to do this, and there's certainly no opposition to it that's been expressed to me. And perhaps you may take the well later if you've heard differently from any of your county boards of election. I would encourage anybody to speak up on behalf of your populations that you represent if any of them have expressed concerns to you.
Thank you. And Senator, will you yield for one final question?
Be my pleasure.
I know you put a hard date in here of 30 days. I'm concerned in the middle of this pandemic that we're dealing with that there may be issues that some of these VREs, because of illnesses, complications, computer outages, and the like that they may have been impacted by. Question, why the 30-day hard date instead of allowing some kind of escape clause where they would not have to pay a fine if it was due to some legitimate reason? Thank you, Senator.
Okay, I'll go ahead and answer that. Listen, this is information they have on election day, who voted. You know, this is giving credit to people that votes have been counted. And I mean, it's just not complicated to report that figure. That's not costly. It's not time consuming. It's not a burden or any problem. It's just asking these people to do their job. And I don't feel like giving somebody a month to report whether or not I voted in an election or my name was, a ballot was cast in my name is an undue burden on anybody. It shouldn't cost any more money at all. And the only reason there's a fine is to send the message that we expect you to comply with the law. Otherwise, if there's no enforcement mechanism, they're just flaunting it and disregarding it, and then we're shaking the public's confidence in our election results. And that's not good for any of us, because each of us wants to be holding these seats with the confidence of the people that we were the choice of the majority in our districts. So I hope I've swayed you. Would love to have your support for this. And Senator, thank you for your questions.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 31st for a question.
Senator, yield.
I yield.
Just have one question. Is it not true that credit for voting issues normally occur during early voting and absentee by mail?
Yes, that's true.
Will you further yield?
I do.
Two questions. Is it not true that credit for voting for early voting and absentee should be completed by election night?
I think it should be just as in-person voting is.
And finally, Senator, will you yield?
I yield.
Is it not true that currently, even in the most recent elections, credit for voting is normally given by the Secretary of State within 2 weeks after the election? once the election day voter file is extracted by no ink poll pad officials?
That's what they're currently doing within 15 days, and so this gives up to 30 days.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator.
Do you continue to yield?
I do.
Chair recognizes the minority leader for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Yield.
I yield.
You probably know that I was going to ask you that question as to whether you reached out to any counties about whether if they would change from 60 days to 30 days, if that would hamper their work or if it would slow them down, or could they get it done in 30 days? And you said Paulding County?
Yeah, Paulding County, and maybe the senator from 31st, he represents them. He shared with me their reply to his inquiries. He was in committee the day you raised that valid question, Ms. Leader, and they replied, no problem, no additional charge, no cost, it's fine. So
I did reach out to one of my counties. I represent parts of two of the largest counties in the state, DeKalb and Gwinnett. And I reached out to DeKalb, and the answer to me was no, they could not get that work done in 30 days, especially if there was another election like 2020, because they also conduct an audit, and they would need more staff and more resources. So it would be better if they could still have the 60 days.
Did they explain to you why they counted 988 more votes than they gave credit to voters for voting?
I did not ask about those votes,
well,
Senator.
I'm hoping that they get their show together in DeKalb, and this is not an onerous requirement, and we need to have confidence that we're giving credit to people that vote and not counting votes for imaginary people.
Senator, I was only concerned about the shortening of the time that the staff would have to get this work done.
That would be the only county that has reported any concerns about it.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 33rd for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the distinguished senator from the 46th yield.
I'll be glad to. You can even call me one of those y'alls that you refer to.
Well, I got a question for y'all. What kind of research did you do into determining that it should be 30 days instead of 45 days? Maybe I missed that being a little redundant, but
it didn't.
You know, in your smaller counties or smaller places like Chickamauga or somewhere, you know, they have a smaller population compared to places like Cobb, Clayton, DeKalb, and Fulton. So I was just curious, how'd you come to that number?
Well, I didn't have to do a whole lot of research to figure out how many days. We want a timely reporting. And we figured 30 days is beyond the time you've got to certify your results. I mean, you're acting like this is some type of scientific research project to figure out how to certify a vote. These are names you take when you go in there, you sign that form before you vote. They check your name. Are you registered? They have the data the day you vote. This isn't asking them to do some type of deep dive research. It's just reporting information they already know. They have to know it or they shouldn't be allowing you to vote. They have to check and make sure you're registered. And, you know, their process is on an absentee ballot. They got to check and make sure it came from a registered voter in that district, in that precinct. This isn't complicated. It's simply reporting data that was received on election day whenever the ballot was cast and giving you credit for placing your vote. You watch what happens the next time you stand for election and your opponent says, you know, the senator from the 33rd didn't even vote in that election. Because that's the first thing they look at. You know, are you an involved citizen that care enough about this to vote, or are you just putting your name on a ballot? This is not complicated. It's simplistic. It's just a reporting of data already collected on the election day.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 42nd for a question.
Thank you. Mr. President, will the senator yield?
I yield.
Senator, again, I applaud the intent behind this bill. I think it is good to have information as fast as we can. What I'm not an expert on how this works though for the credit for voting, so maybe you can clarify this question I have. So it's my understanding that the counties only give credit for the absentee and provisional ballots.
No, they give credit for whoever voted.
So you
It's,
think
it's your voter history. They report who voted in whatever mechanism they voted. That's how the database is created. It comes from the Board of Elections.
So my understanding, and this is where hopefully you and I can have a dialogue, and if neither of us knows the true answer, maybe someone else in the chamber will. It's my understanding that credit for voting absentee and provisional is done by the county, but everyone that voted in person election day, that credit is actually done by the state. Is that incorrect?
I believe it has to be reported by the local board of registrars or board of elections in each county to get to the state.
So the issue that why I'm asking and why I'm trying to get some clarification is if the hang up is the county, okay, but if the hang up is something on the state side, then why should the county be fined for something that went wrong at the state level?
Because counties run the elections.
But if the state has, I mean, they sort of do, yes, of course. There's many election responsibilities that fall to the counties, but there are also state responsibilities as it relates to elections. So I just want to make sure that we're not fining only counties for something that they did not do wrong and it was actually someone else's responsibility through the process, because I'm sure we can agree that wouldn't be fair. So I'm trying to figure out the process.
Well, I know it seems like everybody in the minority is trying to find a reason to justify a no vote here, but all we're doing is reporting information that's already required under law to be reported. We're not creating any new duties or anything other than the time being faster, so we don't have all these conspiracy theory goings on, people wondering, well, why can't we get the results? What's the holdup? There shouldn't be a holdup.
Senator, I don't think it's fair. I'm trying to ask a real question with all due respect, and I'm really not just looking for, this is the only question I have about your bill.
Well, I hope I've answered it.
Okay, I mean, and I did hear from the elections director that in my big county, because it's a big county, they were like, well, we're not sure if we can enter all that.
Is that the cab too? I take
It's the cab as well.
Okay.
So yes,
Understood.
our elections director did say, look, for a lot of elections it would be okay, but for a large one like November 2020, it may be difficult for us. And so that does get to the heart of the question of what are they responsible for getting credit for? Is it the absentees and provisionals, or is it every single voter that voted in DeKalb County, which is, as you know, going to be hundreds of thousands of people, and you can see how that would require additional staffing to have all that entered within 30 days.
It's entered, they get the date of the day of the election. They can't accept a ballot without it.
Okay,
you have to be a registered voter for your vote to be cast, and each county has the obligation of running the elections. We've delegated that to the counties instead of the state election board having people run to every county and take votes and accumulate data.
So follow up, assuming I agree with you on your last statement, then it just gets back to my original question, which is if the state does have a role to play, I would like an answer on that as it relates to giving credit before I would feel comfortable. And then if it does, then I'm not comfortable with the provision where only the counties are responsible and getting fined.
No obligation other than to put it loaded into the list, the data that's reported by the counties.
All right, thank you.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 31st for a question.
This is Senator Yield.
I yield.
Would you consider a county with a population of 200,000, almost 200,000 people, a large or small county?
Heck if I know. Depends on your perspective. If you live in Atlanta, that's probably old small country county. If you live in a small county, then that's a metropolis. You know, it's just part of your perspective.
This is Senator Yield?
Yes.
But would you not agree that the credence of a county like Paulding County or Clark County or Polk County or Haralson County should be given the same deference as counties like DeKalb, Gwinnett, and Fulton in this state?
I think they all ought to be treated the same.
Thank you, Senator. I have no further questions.
Thank you.
You have no more questions, Senator.
Thank you. I apologize for bringing such a complex bill here. This is 10 lines, but it's just shortening the reporting requirement 30 days from 60 days. I sure would appreciate any support, and I yield the will.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against Senate Bill 184? The chair sees none. Is there objection or agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. The question's on the passage of the bill. All those in favor, vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. Have all senators voted? Thumbs up in the hallway. Mr. Secretary, please close the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 37, the nays are 15. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Chair recognizes the majority leader.
Sorry, Mr. President, I'm back with you now.
You snapped to attention right there. That
Yes,
that was
sir.
pretty interesting to watch.
I moved
Did
the
you
Senate-
hurt anything?
I pulled a hammy.
The other one?
Yep. I moved that the Senate stand adjourned until 10 a.m. on Wednesday, February 24th, 2021.
Mr. Secretary, can you please give us our announcements?
The Rules Committee will meet upon adjournment in room 450. Higher Education Committee will meet at 1 p.m. in room 450. Insurance and Labor Committee will meet at 1 p.m. in mezzanine 1. Health and Human Services Committee will meet at 2:15 in room 450. Public Safety Committee will meet at 2:15 in mezzanine 1. Science and Technology Committee will meet at 2:15 in room 307 CLOB. Regulated Industries and Utilities Committee will meet at 3:30 in room 450. Ethics Subcommittee A will meet at 4:45 in room 307 CLOB. And Transportation Committee will meet at 4:45 in room 450. This completes the order, Mr. President.
All right, I know everybody's noticed that 2 days in a row I've worn the tractor pin. Today is day 2 of National FFA Week. And obviously students across the state with the pandemic are having to figure this out a little bit differently. And so I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Westside Elementary School in Valdosta for taking advantage of the elementary ag pilot program where they're working in greenhouses, learning how animals grow and how animals provide food for us in various ways. So just a quick shout out. Thank you so much for all those kids and folks in and around FFA that are helping bring the greatest industry we have in this state alive. Thank you. We have a couple of announcements too. The chair recognizes his senator from Forsyth County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Science and Technology is going to be canceled today.
You sound so enthused. Chair recognizes, anyone else have an announcement? All right, the majority leader has moved that the Senate stand adjourned until Wednesday, February 24th, 2021 at 10 a.m. All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the Senate stands adjourned.